Amarachi James was the kind of child people noticed immediately, not for tantrums or noise, but for her poise and brilliance. At only 6 years old, she read chapter books with the fluency of a teenager, spoke with a vocabulary that made her teachers stare, and often asked questions that left adults speechless. She had everything money could buy: a designer school uniform, the latest iPad, a private tutor for piano, and a wardrobe that could rival a boutique. Yet, what Amarachi wanted the most wasn't in her room or closet. What she wanted was time with her parents. Mr. and Mrs. James were always busy. Her father, a real estate mogul, was constantly flying across continents, while her mother, a fashion executive, split her days between photo shoots and boardrooms. To make up for their absence, they gave Amarachi the best of everything, except themselves. And so, the little girl spent most of her time alone, watched over by a rotating team of nannies, teachers, and one constant figure: Uncle Joe, the family driver. Uncle Joe was always there. Always smiling. Always offering sweets and gentle pats on the head. But in his eyes, if anyone had bothered to look, there was something cold and calculating. Something Amarachi had started to notice. The black SUV pulled up in front of Amarachi's elite private school like clockwork every day at 2:30 p.m. The security guards recognized it and waved it through without inspection. Uncle Joe always wore a crisp white shirt, dark sunglasses, and a smile that looked warm to strangers, but made Amarachi's stomach tighten. As she stepped into the back seat, the leather was already cool from the air conditioner he had thoughtfully turned on. "My princess," he said, his voice soft, almost too soft. "How was school today?" Amarachi hesitated, clutching her small purple backpack tighter. "Fine," she said, avoiding his eyes in the rearview mirror. She used to talk a lot on these drives, sharing stories about her day and asking questions about the world outside her tinted window. But things had changed. Lately, Uncle Joe would reach his hand back sometimes to touch her leg or her cheek. Once, he had pulled over and said he wanted to play a secret game. She had said no. He had laughed, his voice suddenly sharp like glass. "It won't pain you," he said, as if it were a promise. "I will do it small." That day, she had stayed silent the whole ride home. Now, silence became her shield. Amarachi sat at the edge of the white leather couch in the family's grand living room. The walls were decorated with expensive art, and the scent of imported candles filled the air. Her mother, Mrs. James, was on her phone, talking rapidly about an upcoming fashion show in Paris. Amarachi waited patiently, her tiny fingers twisting the hem of her school blouse. When her mother finally ended the call, Amarachi took a deep breath. "Mummy," she said in a small voice, "I want to tell you something about Uncle Joe." Mrs. James didn't even look up from her phone. What is it, Amarachi? Make it quick. I have a Zoom meeting in 5 minutes. He touches me sometimes. I don't like it, Amarachi whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady, searching her mother's face for understanding. But Mrs. James sighed, exasperated. "Ah, Amarachi, what kind of thing is that to say? Don't let me hear that nonsense again. Uncle Joe has been with us for years. He's like family. You don't go around accusing people like that. Maybe he was just being playful." "Stop imagining things," she snapped, waving her hand as if swatting a fly. Amarachi's heart sank. It wasn't the first time she had tried to tell her mother something serious and been dismissed. But this time, it hurt differently. The ache settled in her chest like a heavy stone. She nodded slowly and left the room without another word. Her mother was already back on her phone, laughing into the screen. That night, Amarachi couldn't sleep. The ceiling in her room sparkled with glow-in-the-dark stars, a gift from her father she had never asked for. She lay under her pink satin duvet, hugging her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, but inside, her mind raced. She had told the truth. She had done what the books in school said to do: speak up when someone touches you in a bad way. But what if no one listened? What if they never would? The door creaked slightly. Her eyes flew open. She knew that sound. Uncle Joe never knocked. He always said he was checking to see if she was okay, but he didn't check on the other staff's children like this. Only her. Amarachi held her breath as she watched the door crack open wider, the hallway light spilling onto the floor like a warning. "My princess," his voice came, soft and syrupy. "You're not sleeping." "I'm tired," she whispered. She clutched Mr. Buttons tighter. "I just want to say good night." He stepped into the room. Every muscle in her tiny body tensed. She wanted to scream, but who would come? She had already told her mother. And her father. He hadn't even called in 3 days. Amarachi closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Uncle Joe stood there for a moment, then finally left, closing the door behind him. When she was sure he was gone, Amarachi let out a silent cry, the kind only children know how to make, one that shakes the soul, but never reaches the ears of adults too busy to care. The next morning, the house staff bustled through the halls as usual, polishing, sweeping, preparing breakfast. Amarachi walked downstairs slowly, still in her pajamas, her face blank. No one noticed anything unusual. In homes like this, where appearances were everything, children were expected to look pretty, smile, and stay out of the way. Uncle Joe was already in the driveway, cleaning the SUV with a rag, humming to himself. When he saw her through the glass doors, he smiled, the same wide smile that fooled everyone else. Amarachi stared back, her face unreadable. "Morning, princess," he called out cheerfully. "Hope you slept well." His voice was laced with fake warmth. To anyone else, it would sound sweet. To Amarachi, it was poison. She didn't answer. She simply walked past the doors and into the kitchen, where her nanny, Auntie Rose, was fixing toast. "Morning, Amarachi. You want jam or peanut butter today?" Auntie Rose asked, not looking up. Amarachi wanted to tell her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The words felt stuck in her throat like thorns. "Peanut butter," she said quietly. In a house full of people, Amarachi felt completely alone. And outside, Uncle Joe's humming grew louder, like a lullaby for the devil. During art class at school, the children were asked to draw their families. Most of the kids eagerly sketched smiling stick figures, mummies, daddies, brothers, and dogs. Amarachi sat quietly, crayons scattered around her desk. Her teacher, Miss Doying, noticed and knelt beside her. "Amarachi, are you okay? You haven't started drawing," she said gently. Amarachi looked up, then picked up a black crayon. Slowly, she began to draw a little girl in a pink dress standing beside a tall man in dark clothes. The man's face was blank, no eyes, no mouth, just a circle. Around them was a house, but instead of windows, there were scribbles that looked like bars. When she was done, she added something odd, a speech bubble coming from the man, "It won't pain you." Miss Doying stared at the drawing for a moment, her smile fading. "Who's this, dear?" she asked carefully. "That's Uncle Joe," Amarachi said, not looking up. That's what he always says before he touches me. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed in Miss Doying's mind like a scream. The teacher froze. This wasn't just a strange drawing. It was a cry for help. Something in Miss Doying's face changed. She looked around the classroom, then leaned closer. "Amarachi, thank you for telling me," she said. "I believe you." For the first time in weeks, Amarachi's eyes widened. Someone had finally listened. Miss Doying waited until lunch break before acting. She knew the protocol well. Teachers weren't supposed to jump to conclusions, but this wasn't a time for silence. She walked Amarachi to the counselor's office with a warm smile, keeping her voice cheerful so as not to raise suspicion among the other students. Inside, the school counselor, Mrs. Odu, adjusted her glasses as Miss Doying shut the door behind them. "Amarachi, this is Mrs. Odu. She just wants to talk to you about your beautiful drawing," Miss Doying said gently. Amarachi sat in the big chair, her small legs swinging. She clutched her backpack tightly and stared at the floor. Mrs. Odu leaned forward with the kindness only certain adults possess. The kind that doesn't need permission to feel real. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "Miss Doying told me what you said about Uncle Joe. Can you tell me more?" There was silence at first. Then, Amarachi whispered, "He tells me not to tell. He said nobody would believe me. I told Mummy, but she said I was lying." Mrs. Odu nodded slowly, every word piercing her heart. "Thank you for telling me. You're very brave." She scribbled something quickly on a notepad and then made a call. Her voice changed. It became firm, urgent. Amarachi didn't understand most of what was said, but she heard certain words: child protection, emergency contact, investigation. For the first time, Amarachi felt something different, a flicker of hope. Outside the school walls, Uncle Joe was sitting in the SUV, tapping the steering wheel and smiling to himself. He didn't know that the walls were beginning to close in. That afternoon, Uncle Joe pulled the SUV to the usual spot in front of Amarachi's school. He whistled a familiar tune and adjusted the rearview mirror. He liked being early. It gave him time to feel in control. He had spent years gaining the family's trust, running errands, driving Amarachi to school, even picking up Mr. James's dry cleaning. Nobody ever questioned Uncle Joe. But today, something was off. Instead of Amarachi running out with her usual careful steps and oversized backpack, two security guards approached the car. Behind them was a stern-looking woman in a grey suit, someone he didn't recognize. She held a folder tightly against her chest. "Good afternoon, sir. You are Uncle Joe, correct?" the woman asked. "Yes. I am," he replied, uncertain. "I am Mrs. Akingbe, from Lagos State Child Protection Services. We need you to step out of the vehicle and come with us for some questioning." Uncle Joe's face froze, but he quickly forced a smile. What's going on here? I just came to pick my princess. There must be a misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding," Mrs. Akingbe said firmly. "A formal complaint has been made. You'll have to come with us." The guards opened the car door, and Uncle Joe hesitated, but only for a moment. The smile slipped from his face. He knew the game was shifting. And for the first time in years, he didn't have control of the board. Back inside the school, Amarachi watched from a small office window as Uncle Joe was led away. She didn't smile. She just held Mr. Buttons close and whispered to herself, "You see, I told the truth." Amarachi sat on a cushioned bench outside the school counselor's office, her feet dangling, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. Mrs. Odu had tried calling her parents twice. No one answered. The first call went straight to voicemail. The second was picked up by a rushed assistant who said Mrs. James was in a meeting and unavailable for the rest of the day. Mr. James was reportedly in Dubai on business. Mrs. Odu returned with a sigh, kneeling in front of Amarachi. "We are trying to reach your mummy, sweetheart. We'll keep trying, okay?" Amarachi nodded slowly. "She won't come," she said flatly. "She never comes." That evening, Amarachi was taken home in a different car, escorted by a government social worker. As she stepped into the mansion's grand foyer, Mrs. James stood at the top of the stairs in a silk robe, phone in one hand, wine glass in the other. "What is all this nonsense?" she barked. "They said you reported Uncle Joe." "Amarachi, do you know how embarrassing this is for me?" "I told you before, but you didn't listen," Amarachi said quietly. Mrs. James scoffed. "You're just a child. Always making up stories. Do you know how much that man has done for this family? You better not start drama in this house." Her voice rose with every sentence. Amarachi stepped back. She didn't cry. She had cried enough. Now she just stared, silent, small, but unbroken. Her truth had already begun its journey, and no amount of shouting could erase it. Upstairs, her mother slammed her bedroom door. Downstairs, Amarachi stood alone in the vast house, where silence echoed louder than screams. The house was quiet again, too quiet. After her mother's outburst, Amarachi had been told to go to her room and think about her behavior. She sat on the edge of her bed, tracing patterns on the floor with her toe. The large chandelier above her cast glittering shadows on the marble tiles, but the beauty of the room only made the emptiness feel colder. Later that night, a knock came on her door. It was Auntie Rose, the nanny. She walked in carrying a tray of food, jollof rice and fried plantains. "Here, eat. You haven't eaten all day," she said, setting the tray down. Amarachi looked up, her eyes tired. "Auntie Rose, do you believe me?" she asked. The woman paused. She looked into Amarachi's eyes and sighed deeply. "It's not about what I believe, small madam. Some things in this house, it's better not to talk about. People who talk too much don't last long here." Amarachi said nothing. She picked at the food and stared out the window at the night sky. She remembered how the stars looked from school, like they were watching over her. In this house, the stars seemed to hide behind the darkness. Downstairs, Mrs. James sat by the fireplace with her laptop open and a glass of wine by her side. She was already on a video call, laughing with her fashion team about Paris Fashion Week. The sound of her daughter's voice, her pain, her story. It was like background noise she had trained herself not to hear. But what she didn't know was that people were beginning to listen. Outside her world of meetings and image, the truth had started to gather strength. The next morning, just as the family staff began their usual routine, polishing the staircase railings, fluffing pillows, and setting breakfast trays, the front doorbell rang. It wasn't the delivery man or the gardener. It was the social worker from the day before, Ms. Wheel, holding a clipboard and wearing a firm expression. Her badge hung visibly around her neck, a symbol of authority that no one in the house could ignore. Mrs. James, still in her satin robe and annoyed at the disruption, met her in the grand sitting room. "What is the meaning of this? You people already embarrassed us yesterday. What more do you want?" "I'm here to conduct a welfare check on Amarachi," Ms. Wheel replied calmly. "We have reasons to believe she may not be in a safe emotional environment, even at home. She made disclosures, and we take those very seriously. Mrs. James scoffed. She's a dramatic child. She's always been sensitive. I told her not to spread lies. She's already making us look like irresponsible parents. Ma, Miss Wheel said, her voice firm but respectful. A 6-year-old doesn't invent details like that for attention. She named her abuser. She explained how she tried to tell you. And now she's showing signs of emotional withdrawal. That's more than enough reason to investigate further. Upstairs, Amarachi peeked through the railing, watching the exchange. For the first time, an adult had come back. Not just to talk, but to fight for her. As the voices downstairs rose and fell, she squeezed Mr. Buttons to her chest and whispered, "Maybe I won't always be invisible." And for the first time in a long while, she started to believe it might be true. By evening, Amarachi sat in the garden alone, watching ants carry crumbs beneath the trimmed hedges. She wasn't allowed to return to school yet. Mrs. James had told the staff to keep her inside until all this nonsense blows over. But Amarachi knew something had shifted. The house didn't feel the same anymore. It was quieter, heavier. People were walking on eggshells. Later, her father returned from his trip. Mr. James was a tall, imposing man with an expensive wristwatch and a phone that never left his hand. As he stepped into the living room, Mrs. James rushed to meet him. "You won't believe what your daughter has done," she began, her voice laced with frustration. "She told those government people that Joe, our Joe, has been touching her. Can you imagine the embarrassment? The headlines if this leaks." Mr. James waved her off impatiently. "Please, I just got back. Where is she?" When he finally entered Amarachi's room, she stood up nervously, unsure of what to expect. "Mr. James looked at her as if trying to remember how to be a father. "Amarachi, what's all this about Uncle Joe?" he asked. She swallowed. "Daddy, I told Mummy before. He touches me in a bad way. I don't like it." But nobody listened. He stared at her, silent. Then, with a sigh, he turned around. "You should have told someone earlier," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Now there's drama everywhere. I have investors calling me about this story." Amarachi's mouth dropped open slightly. He didn't hug her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just left the room. She stood there for a long time, realizing something awful. She had parents, but no protectors.